James Wray. James is an ophthalmic imaging technician from Sussex Hospital, and so James was introduced to us actually by one of my previous teaching fellows, Neil Clough, who is now a consultant there. And James is going to be talking to us about something really fascinating, which is his invention of a camera using an intraocular lens implant. And James has a passion for photography and he's channeled this into making his own camera. So I'm really looking forward to your talk, James. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name's James. As I said, ophthalmic imaging technician, Sussex Eye Hospital. I'll start off with, basically, we're just going to go through the background, sort of personal a little bit, then what kind of inspired me to create this kind of idea around it, and then there's a conceptualization as to there was a problem that kind of needed being solved, and then we sort of made it from there, and then building it, testing it, finding things that need to be improved upon it, and then hopefully what we can do with it in the future. So, quick little bit of background history on me. I'm not scientific or medical in any nature. I studied photography at university, very artsy-farty. So I did everything that was as old and complicated as possible. So that was 19th century photographic processes, so wet plate photography, cyanotype, salt printing, photomicrographs as well, and then building my own cameras, especially during lockdown when we had nothing to do. And one of the things that really sort of drove the passion for doing these was finding stories from history and being interested in the old photographers and people who kind of innovated within that kind of industry. And one of the people was this man. Does anybody know who this man is? No? Okay. His name is John Logie Baird, and he was a pioneering inventor of television. And he produced the first televised images in 1923 using an entirely mechanical process. There's no the only electricity in it is to power a light bulb and a motor. And he was creating these giant flywheels called Nipkoff discs, which scan a face at about 750 RPM using these giant glass lenses. And he wasn't getting enough quality in his pictures, so in about 1925, 1926, he thought, I need to make them better. So he bought these giant 8-inch lenses and put 31 of them inside these massive spinning wheels. And using 1920s glue, spinning at that kind of speed, these glass lenses would scythe through the air and hit whatever came in their path. And so he thought, okay, that's not going to work, but I need to make my lenses better quality and smaller and lighter. And he was a bit of a madman, to be honest. In about 1917, he tried to create artificial diamonds in his own bedroom by using the local power station, and then directing it straight into his house. And he blew up Glasgow's power station for about a week. So he invented so many other things. Just read his Wikipedia article; it's a good laugh. But yeah, so instead of going to an optics specialist or anything like that, he decided to fake being a doctor. And he went to a London hospital and befriended a surgeon there who convinced him to give him a human eye. And then he went scurrying back to Frith Street in Soho, where his workshop was, and then he took a knife out and started cutting into it, and he was going to get the lens out of that and study it and see how he could make it work for his cameras. Unfortunately, he wasn't a surgeon, so it just went splat on his table, and then he abandoned that idea and left it. And so I thought, first off, what a madman, but also what a fabulous story. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could take a photograph using a human eye? That would just be amazing. But this was 10 years ago. I had no interest in being part of the NHS. I never thought I would even begin to be part of it. And then 10 years later, I started working in an eye hospital. So I was like, great, cool. So that idea is kind of still stemming there. So then we come along to Mr. Nanavati, who is our head cornea consultant. And one day I'm just chatting to him, and I thought of this idea again, and I decided to just ask him, would it be possible to get hold of an IOL and make a camera out of it? And as a, like, I thought he would just be like, why would you want to do that? And then sort of fob me off. But actually, he was amazing. He immediately said, well, we've actually got a bit of a problem at the moment. One of our IOLs it's creating fall off, which is where the lens doesn't cover the entirety of the retina. And he was saying, if you could create a camera that could show where this fall off is appearing, then we could sort of contact the company and hopefully make some corrections with it. So I'll give you one of these IOLs, you go off, make the camera, and then we'll see what happens. So I was like, brilliant, cool. So he literally threw the packet at me across the room. I caught it and then started. So I had absolutely no idea about these lenses. There's very little information just on the general web about them. But I kept it wrapped up in a piece of cling film until I was ready to start using it. And so thankfully, the box did give a bit of information. So the focal distance for the lens, which is the distance the lens needs to be from the imaging plane, so where you put the sensor or the film, was 13 millimeters. So I measured that out and I thought, okay, what can I use that would work as a sort of a sort of construction for that? And I thought of a matchbox. I'd seen people make cameras out of them before, and so when I bought one and measured it, it was 15 millimeters, and I thought, fantastic. I can put some paper spacing in the back of the camera to fill that gap, that 2 millimeter gap, so then I'll have infinity focus. So I started off by doing that. Next up, I didn't want to touch this lens at all, so I started making this little cardboard sandwich, and I drilled 2 holes into it, and so then I could place the lens inside it, pick it up, move it around, and then I could fit it onto the camera without having to touch the lens at all. And so then stuck it on. It's very Heath Robinson, sort of do-it-yourself kind of thing. And so I said, just stuck it on, and then I was like, okay, right, well, let's see if it actually works. So I started pointing the camera out of the window, and so what you can see is the camera here is actually creating an inverted image. So it is properly focusing, it is working. So what you can see here is the window at the top, and then building on the side, and then tree foliage. And so I was like, fantastic. This means that I can take a photograph with this because it is focusing a clear image. So I then thought, okay, just because I'm doing this all by hand and it's using film, I'm not doing it digitally, I need a sort of a dark space where I can do a longish exposure time to hopefully get the exposure right first time and then work backwards from there to create a good quality exposed image. So I went into the bedroom because it was kind of dark in there, set up the camera, and then I'm just using a piece of cardboard in front of the lens, lifted it up for 2-3 seconds, closed it down, scurried off into my bathroom, which was a windowless room that I could develop the image in. And so there you can see it sort of just knelt on stone floor, hoping that no one would come in. And then here was the result. So this is the negative, and immediately I was jumping for joy basically because I could see there was definitely an image there. And so we'll make it a positive. So what you can see is the bed frame, window, the curtain there, a lighting fixture here, and then light being streamed in. Obviously, it is no means a sort of perfect image or anything, but it's a start. And I was just ecstatic about that. So I then started taking a couple more images, so just taking the same photograph out the window. And again, this is about a 2 to 3 second exposure time. And so immediately the other thought was, I can't fix Mr. Nadvati's problem, unfortunately. This camera is very much just bare bones basic. I would need a cornea, I would need a curved image plane for the retina, all this kind of stuff. We wouldn't be able to do that. But I spoke to him and he said, that's fine, we'll just carry on, see what you can do from that, and I'd like to see your results later on. So I carried on. And I thought, right, I need to make some improvements on this camera. So I started off by getting rid of just putting a little flap on it, and then I put an actual sort of shuttered flap that I could lift up, close again, and then not worry about sort of when I'm scurrying back into my darkroom whether my hand slipped and it started exposing it again. Second of all, the infinity focus images that was producing, the negatives are tiny, so the image quality is very, very basic and really not that good. So I thought, okay, while I'm just playing around with this, I'm going to remove that spacing at the back and then pull that focal distance back a little bit, so everything that's in front of the lens will have to be closer. So it'll be good for portraits and things like that. So then the last thing I did was I put an iris or an aperture on it to slow down the exposure time. So hopefully then I wouldn't be sort of flapping it, creating camera movement and blur and shaking and all that kind of stuff. And what it also would do is it would sharpen the image quality as well, because if anybody's ever done a visual acuity test with a patient, when you get the occluder, you put the pinholes over, and that sharpens up their image quality a little bit because it gets rid of the peripheral light and just focuses on central light coming into their eye. And it's exactly the same with cameras. When you close down the aperture in the camera, it gets rid of peripheral light, which darkens the image, but it also produces a higher quality focused image. So I started taking more photographs. Immediately I realized it's a really wide angle image. It's about almost about 130 degree image. And so that was quite interesting. And so I started making more. I started taking some terrible selfies with it because I was doing this purely on my days off. There was nobody around to help or sort of be a sitter or anything like that. So just literally holding it in front of me on a tripod, lift up, close. Started taking more terrible selfies. Terrible. Then I wrote some friends in, and I started doing some more experiments where I was using flash lighting, and so it just lift the flat, bang, flash, close it again, rather than doing a long exposure to see if I could get more instantaneous images. And it also created, as you can see, a higher contrast image, which was quite interesting. Then later on, I wanted to see what we could do about sort of like perfecting the focus and exposure times, so I started doing that. Then came on to the kind of like, I wanted to create a really good quality image with this, probably the best one, and then see what I could do with it in terms of showing people. So I was chatting to some people at work, and they were saying that you should go to the IMI conference and put it in for one of their awards. So I popped it in, and this was the winner. They gave me a bronze prize, so I was very happy with that. So then later on, the last kind of thing I did with it was I did some trial lenses where, like, you go to the opticians and they say, is it better with one or two? Just to see if I could create any kind of a change in the focal length of the image or anything like that. But again, because there's no cornea in front of it, it just didn't really do anything. It kind of just befuddled the image. But at this point, it was the end of this model. It was as much as I could push out. It was great as a beginner camera, but I wanted to create something more. So later on, this is in the future. Hopefully, the things that I want to do with it, a 3D printed body. So at the moment, it's made of cardboard. I want it to be solid, and so it stopped light leaking and things like that. I want it to have an independent mechanical or electronic shutter, so it's not just my hand lifting a flap. I also want to have a digital image because then it can have digital manipulation in it a lot easier. And then also have some kind of a cornea or condensing lens in front of it to then marry it up to be more like a human eye. Later on as well, with digital will come colour, which will be much more interesting. Also collaboration, because I've just been doing this on my own, so if anybody wants to collaborate, let me know. And then also, more terrible selfies. And then the future. So there are two things that I thought I could do with this this camera primarily. The first one would be later on some kind of a clinical trial camera. So it could be potentially use this as a long way off, seeing what patients see. So we could then simulate patient conditions and see if we can then alter it or at least give some kind of empathetic kind of idea where we know what they're suffering with. Later on, also could be used in clinical trials and simulate patient conditions. The other one is in education, and this was kind of more up my street, which is sort of like being used to teach first year medical students just the optics of the eye. So this is exactly what you have, and then you can see what's going on. And so with this eye, if you change out different IOLs, so you have multifocal ones, and then again you could simulate patient conditions so that you show the students this is what's happening to this person and this is how we can correct for it. And then also even take it into secondary schools and then teach people students in there that this is what you could do in ophthalmology, and then get them interested in science in general, but then hopefully ophthalmology down the road. And that's it. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Have you got any questions for James?
Just one. Thanks, that's so cool. I'm just wondering whether you were able to simulate that fall-off feature that your consultant colleague was irritated by.
Yeah, I think it would be, again, kind of far off down the line, because again, the camera itself, hang on a minute, somewhere in the pocket, there we go. So yeah, it's very much just it's tiny, but yeah, it's you've got a flat image plane at the moment, so again with the retina it would have to be curved, so we'd then sort of like do that, and then you'd need the cornea and things like that. So at the moment we're only getting about like 1/3 of the results that an actual patient would probably have. So hopefully with like the next models down the line and things like that, we might be able to then hopefully sort of like fix that problem if it is still a problem. But yeah.
Just a suggestion, you can get model eyes for surgical practice.
Yes.
They're not that expensive.
No, I had heard about these.
And it doesn't get around the curved sensor problem. I don't know how on earth you solve that.
One of the ideas that I had about as a potentially solving that problem is to still use a flat image plane, but then do it digitally, and then to later on digitally manipulate the image to then sort of have a curved effect about it. But again, way off down the line. Cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone.